Hi, welcome to day 7 of the Python challenge, and today we're going to talk about reading from files. So without further ado, let's get started. So on the previous lessons, what we did mainly was we wrote a couple of lines which were on the main memory, and for execution those lines would communicate to the CPU, and for input we usually use our keyboard, and the output which usually would be some simple print output command. Now we're going to start talking about opening the files. Files usually are residing on the secondary memory, which is our hard drive, and we also have the possibility to get information from database, or we can connect to the network and get information from the network. So this is kind of starting chapter from to work from the secondary memory, database, or network devices. So usually the file that we are dealing with going forward in these lessons are going to be text file. So text file we can consider them as a sequence of lines. So we have several lines, sometimes it's blank line, but that's how we consider a file, a sequence of lines that we have. How we can open it, the file? We can use the open function, and open function will return a file handle. It's basically a variable we can use to perform the operation to the file. The open function is if we want to use an analogy, is very simple to going to our word processing software and click on file and open. That's very similar to the open function in Python. So the open function has a couple of parameters. The first one is the file name. We specify the name of the file that we want to open, and the other parameter is the mode of that. We have two modes. We have read mode and we have write mode. In read mode, we don't touch the file, we just simply open it to see the content of it. In write mode, we manipulate that, we delete, add, or basically edit the file. Again, the open function will return a handle that we can use to manipulate the file. The file name input is a string that we use to identify the name of the file, and the mode can be identified by R for read and W for write. So again, when we open for example, the mbox.txt, the output of it will be, the content of the file will be handed over to the handle, and the file handle is basically what allows us to either open it, read it, write, or close it. So basically that's the file handle between the actual file and the operation that we want to perform on it. So let's say we want to use the open function. We put a file name, but the file name is either missing or the Python cannot reach it. So in that case, we will get a traceback. which says file not found error. So no such file or directory, in this case stuff.txt. We have to be aware of it. We will talk about it later, how to mitigate this situation. One of the other things that we have to be aware of is the new line character. So in Python, the new line character is identified by \n. So in this example, you see we have a string hello \n word. We put it on the variable called stuff. When we call stuff, we get exactly that string. But when we print stuff, the print function will interpret that \n as a new line, and the output would be hello new line word. Another example is we put x \n y as a string with quotation to a variable called stuff. When we print that, we get x, the new line, because of the \n and capital Y. That's going to be the output here. If we do a length function in that variable, we get 3. So \n or new line is considered as a character on the length function. So just to be mindful that new line is 1 character when we use the length function. Okay, so as we mentioned, the files that we're talking about in this course are mainly text file. So a file can be thought of as a sequence of lines. So here we have a couple of lines, we have empty lines, and another line here. So that's what we're gonna deal mainly with when we're talking about file in this course. We have to be mindful that at the end of each line we have a \n, which is basically identifying a new line for us. We don't see it, but it's there. So how are we gonna read a file in Python? It's using the handle, the file handle, of course, and in this case we're going to use a for loop. So we open a file using the open command, open function. We put that in a variable called x file, and we have a for loop, and says for cheese in x file, which means for each line in this file, x file, print cheese. Cheese in this example is the line. It's not very mnemonic, but we can just we will change it in the next slide. So basically we have a loop that goes through each line of the file that we open here, and for each iteration of that loop we have a print of that line. We can add a count variable to our previous example, and in this case we say that for line in fhand, which means for each line which is in this fhand function, fhand variable, for each iteration of that, which means that for each line we will add 1 to the variable count. So basically we count the number of lines in the fhand, and then we say we print line count is equal to the number of count. When we call that command, when we call that function, in this example we have line count is the number of lines in that file. Um, this is an example that we're gonna read the whole file. So what we do, we use the open function, we put that to the variable f_hand, we read that, we call the read function, and we put that output to the IMP variable. We call the length function on that, and we print the output of length function, which gives us this, and that's the number of characters which are in that file, including the new line. So when the get to a \n, that \n will be considered as 1. So that's the number of characters in that file, including the new lines. This is a string, of course. IMP is a string. In this case, as we talked on the previous lecture, we gonna print the string from character 0 to character 19. As we mentioned here, this does not include 20, so it's from character 0 to 19, which is the first 20 character of that file, which in this case is this is the output of it. Okay, so we're gonna search through a file here. We're gonna open it with the open function, put it in the f_hand. For each line in the f_hand, we're gonna say that if the line starts with from with capital F column space, we're gonna print that line. So that's how we search for a line which starts with this specific phrase. The problem with that is we get the output, of course. All of these lines has that specific phrase, which is from with capital F column space, but we see an extra line, extra new line at the end of it. The reason is the print function will add an additional new line, and on top of that we have a \n at the end of that file that we read. So the yellow \n is from the print function, the green \n are from the file that we already opened. So that's how we end up with the empty line between these outputs here. How to fix that is quite easy. We just need to introduce a write strip function to each line that we read, and that will delete the \n at the end of each line, and we will end up only with the new line that are inserted from the print function. So our output will be without those extra lines that we saw in the previous slide. So we can rewrite this previous code using a continue if continue function, a continue function in the from, basically, and the for loop. I'm sorry. So again, we open this file, we put it in the f_hand variable. For each line we do a write strip, we get rid of that \n at the end of each line, and here we say that if the line does not start with from, with this phrase, if it does not continue means go back to the next iteration of the for loop, and we just continue in this for loop iteration until we find a line which starts with from. In that case, we're going to print that line, and this for loop will continue till the end of the file, line by line, and in the end we will have the similar result that we had on the previous slide, except in this case we use the continue feature, which kind of skips. So if it doesn't find it, it doesn't print anything, it just goes back to the top of the for loop and goes to the next iteration. So here we're going to talk about how we can use in, which is a special character in Python. So here we open the file, we put it in the F hand. For each line in the F hand, we get rid of the \n at the end using the write strip function, and if that line does not include at uct.ac.za, we go back to the next iteration. If it does contain this phrase, we will print it. So we will end up with the output of the lines that include this phrase anywhere in the line. So this is going to be our sample output here, and that's how we can use the in, the special phrase, the reserved phrase in Python. So on the previous example, we manually gave the file to the program. In this case, we want to prompt the user to enter the name of the file. So we use the input function and we say enter the file name. We take that name and we keep it in the variable fname. We open that file name and we put it in the variable fhand, our file handler. We set our counter to 0. For each line in that file, if the line starts with subject, we're gonna add 1 to our counter, and at the end of that we're gonna say that's the number of subject line that we find in that file. So in this case they're gonna be 1797 subject lines. In this case it's gonna be 27. The problem that we could potentially get to is maybe the user enter a file name that does not exist, or it's a bad file name. In that case, this open function will return an error. It will return a traceback error. We can expect that, and we can use a try except function. So we put this danger in potentially tracebacky issue line under try, and we say that if that happened, if we got a traceback, if the file was bad, we print file cannot be opened, this file name, and we quit. Quit means that we don't go to the next of the program, we just go to the very end of the program. So here, so if this does not happen, if our file name is good and we can open it without a traceback, we just continue here. We put our count variable to 0 for each line in the file. If the line starts with subject, we're going to add the 1 to our counter, and at the end we're going to say, okay, that's how many lines with starting with subject was in our file. And in this case, if the file name is mbox.txt, we can find it. The output would be this. If we put a random name that does not exist, we get this message from accept that file cannot be opened. In summary, today we talked about secondary storage. As we said, we are moving away from simple input output from keyboard. We're gonna get started with more complex data. We talked how to open it using the file handle. We talked about the structure of the file, that at the end of each line we have a new character. We talked about reading a file line by line using the loop function. We talked about searching for specific lines. We talked about reading the file names, prompting the users to put that. And we talked about dealing with bad files. As usual, we have to give credit where it's due. Thank you to Mr. Charles Severance for his slides and teaching material. For more information, you can go to Python for All, for everybody, and I will put that in the description link. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.